Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the new Brit workshop and this second Nifty Neatos video. Now, if you've got something really awkward to hold that you want to either plane, sand or work on in some way, like this very thin piece of mahogany which I have here, it actually gets a bit difficult. You might put some non-slip matting down on your bench top and try and do your best to work on it, but it's not absolutely ideal because the piece of wood may have a little bit of curve to it because it's so thin. You need to be holding it absolutely flat to the bench top. Now, a long time ago, and I really can't remember which video I showed this in, I made a very simple vacuum box. It had a series of holes on it, as you can see there, a port here which you could connect your vacuum hose, and then off it went and it would clamp whatever it is to the surface. It sort of worked reasonably well, but when I came to try it with this piece, it wasn't quite adequate. And I thought, well, I've got to revisit this, and hence I'm making this video now. And I've produced this new vacuum box. It's slightly bigger. The pitch is a little better so that when you're using these clamps, these festal clamps, you can get it sorted out and fixed to your bench top. And it's big enough for quite awkward sized pieces of wood. And if you wish to, you can still use some non-slip matting on top to hold it just a little bit firmer if need be. Let me next just show you it in operation. So here that is, and I'm going to cover up all these holes now. You can hear the vacuums working just a little bit harder, but now I can work on this piece of wood quite nicely. And now let's see how I went about making it. As that measurement is less than 300, I have to use my little extension piece here, which is 300 long, and the amount I want to cut off is 155, so I just add on the scale here 300 to 155, so that's 455. I need two of these. So that's all my pieces of wood cut. Now I've just drilled a 35mm hole which will take the end of my 27mm festal hose. And the next stage is to drill 4 15mm holes. If you imagine it's going to be positioned like this, actually around like that, on the top of the bench. I need a hole here and a hole here, which will be for a clamp to come up from underneath to hold it down onto the top of your bench top. And the distance between that centre there and that centre there is exactly 3 times 96, 288. And now some screw holes, which will be for the cross pieces. I'm going to use 2 screws at each end here. Now, this doesn't need to be glued, and I'm not gluing mine, and you don't need to be ridiculously accurate when you get it all lined up. I'm just making sure everything is flush here and here. And you can now see how this looks. We've got the hole there for the extractor hose. We've got a port here and a port here where we can put one of those festal clamps, and the same on the other side, so it can be held down to your workbench. I've just marked out where I'm going to put some holes now. And I'm just putting some 4mm holes around here so that the top and the bottom can be fixed to the frame. Make sure when you're doing the assembly, the part with the holes in goes at the top, and these holes on the side here at the bottom. So there's the finished vacuum box, and all I've got to do now is fix it to my bench. And all you do is you take one of these festal clamps, feed it up from underneath like so, and feed it into the hole that we've designated for it. Now, before I turn the vacuum on, let me warn you, when you make one of these, you've got to understand how your particular vacuum machine works. If your machine relies on the air flowing through the hose to go via the motor and keep the motor cool, then you do need to ensure that you have some air flowing through. If you have a Festool extractor, you don't have to worry about that. However, I'm going to show you the absolute ultra safe way of doing it. I'm going to make sure that there is some extra air flowing through. Now, there are two ways of doing it. One is that when you put your piece of wood on here, you don't cover up all the holes. Let's try that. Well, it's not really terribly effective. So if I close that off like that, so I've got just a small gap there and the air is flowing through, and that's held pretty firmly, so I can start planing or sanding or whatever. Now, the other way of getting some sort of bypass air through is this is the hose which is going to the actual vacuum block, and its port is open. But I could open one of these other gates here partially, which will allow a little bit of air to flow from somewhere else through the motor and keep everything cool. So here that is, and I'm going to cover up all these holes now. You can hear the vacuums working just a little bit harder, but now I can work on this piece of wood quite nicely. And there is yet another way of doing it, and you could have a little opening on the side of the box itself with a little flap that you can adjust to partially cover it or partially uncover it so that some air can flow through the system that way. But you can see I was able to plane this really awkward to hold piece of wood. It's very, very thin, and to do that on a bench top would not be easy. You would normally try and clamp it from one end, do a bit going away that way, clamp it from the other end. But of course the grain of the wood then messes you up. So this is a far better way of doing it. And just to illustrate now how useful this is, this sander is connected to the same CT26 via my dust hub as is the vacuum box here. So the one extractor is serving them both. When I turn the sander on, the vacuum will turn on. Now, if you find that your piece of wood slides around a lot, then you can always use a piece of this material on top and then put your piece of wood back on. The vacuum goes on. You may have seen this piece of wood go down. So there you have it. There's a very simple to make vacuum box which can be enhanced with a bit of this non-slip mat if you need it. Which you can use to hold awkward pieces on your bench top whilst you either plane them, sand them or whatever. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.